Hello, this is my second video blog, I guess you could call it, and it's in response to a question, a legitimate question, which had been asked to me on my channel by someone that watched my first video. What was the first metal band that I got into? And that kind of inspired me because I feel like to go on and talk about all this surf and then say I'm a metalhead, might make people wonder what's going on here. And it's worth explaining, kind of how I got to where I'm at and where I'm at in music mostly and where I draw my inspiration from. But to answer point blank, I have to say I started with Metallica. Metallica as a drummer, and I started playing drums when I was 10 years old. Lars Ulrich was probably the biggest influence to my style, and he's who I patterned my playing after. I learned a lot of those early songs, which I'm 43 years old, so early songs to me, Injustice for All and the Black Album were kind of where I started. And then in those days, we had these things called record stores. So what we did, every week I'd save up money. I remember it was $16.04 to buy a CD. So I'd save up money at whatever restaurant or wherever I was working and go buy a CD or two. What I would do is go and look for the cool looking older guys that were hanging out in the metal section and say, hey, this is what I'm into. What should I buy? So I go and, I get the essentials, Kill 'Em All, Ride the Lightning, Master of Puppets. I have my whole collection up to the Black Album. I loved every single minute of all those albums. I'm not going to go into a discourse about Metallica. I also love Megadeth. Megadeth was really influential early on, especially like So Far, So Good, So What. And the Countdown to Extinction album, those were really very influential to my style of playing guitar once I started to play guitar a couple years after I started to play drums. But there was this movie that came out in the 90s. I just happened to have a VHS copy of it, and this movie changed everything. So Jim Carrey was huge. I always loved Jim Carrey. When I saw this movie, this band on stage, I had never heard anything quite like that. And everyone that has seen it knows that's Cannibal Corpse. And they're playing a song off of the Tomb of the Mutilated album called Hammer Smash Face. Actually, they're playing the last note of the Cryptic Stench, and they move into Hammer Smash Face. And I think that's probably the first time I saw a blast beat on television. And as a drummer and as a teenage drummer, I'm like trying to take things to the next level. And that was totally awesome. It just blew my mind. And also, Paul is choking the cymbal with his hand and has this drum glove on him. Like, that is cool. It's really cool. Where is more of this? I need to find this, So I went out. I think I started with The Bleeding, Tomb of the Mutilated, Eaten Back to Life, Butchered to Birth, those classic Cannibal Corpse albums. And that started to lead me into, I would say, if you ask me, above all, my favorite death metal band ever is Morbid Angel. I really, really like Morbid Angel. So this TV show that was on in the 90s, which I watched often, was called Beavis and Butthead. Everyone knows that show, I'm sure. And I remember seeing the God of Emptiness video, and they're making fun of it on there. And again, I'm like, whoa, what is that? Like, that's super dark. And seeing Pete Sandoval play drums in this style just really, really caught my ear. And I started to try to play like that. And I went out and I bought the album Covenant, and that was very much a major turning point in my progression from Metallica, Megadeth, Slayer. Slayer was very influential. Then moving into Cannibal Corpse, Morbid Angel, Decapitated, some of the other bands that I listened to early back then, Broken Hope, Malevolent Creation. I started to get into black metal around that time. I can't really point my finger on exactly how that happened, other than to say Emperor. Emperor is my favorite black metal band, and that also really started to influence my writing and my style. And it's just blast beats all day long. A lot of the songs on, like The Lost and Curse of Reverence, for example. Dark Funeral, that was another early black metal band, Dimmu Borgir. So I'm in bands, I'm playing in bands. Around that time, we're writing our own stuff, and we're trying to sound like these artists, and we're covering these songs. Some of the earlier bands I was in, one was called Rapture, one was called Dark Martyr. I think the most success I've had in a death metal band is called Liquefied Guts, and I will post some links because there are some of our songs which are now, when I was a part of that band, this is going back 20 years now. So as a musician, as a metal drummer, a death metal drummer, the most success I've ever had was to play uh, shows in bars, around the Pittsburgh area. Nothing really, really major, but to us, to me, these venues, the Rex Theater, Bloomfield, Coyote Cafe, the White Hawk Cafe. These were places that I always like to go to see shows and to see my buddies' bands play. So that's kind of all it really was to me, was like our bands there and all our girlfriends. And actually, my ex-wife was in the band and played rhythm guitar for the band. I was in Liquefied Guts, and we're all hanging out watching each other's bands play. So that's basically the height of my success as a death metal drummer musician. Now, running in the background, I always had a solo project I called Exorcism, which I called introspective black metal. I actually tried to push it as Christian black metal, which didn't work out so well, but I'm not Christian. I wasn't Christian back then the way I am now. But what I will say is I wasn't all about writing satanic lyrics either. And I wrote lyrics about myself mainly, but I made them very mysterious and kind of veiled, used lots of big words, for example. And I got that inspiration from bands like Carcass, where you need a dictionary to understand what they're saying, and you may still not understand what they're saying. But so those are some of the things that I was doing around that time. Now, Pulp Fiction is another one of my favorite movies, and I feel like my life has very much been in this Pulp Fiction universe. And the Dick Dale rendition of Miserlou, which is the opening track to that movie, sounds kind of like metal, drum picking, and also in Phrygian dominant, which is a mode. So these things, the metal, the surf, and my understanding of modal music. Now, as a music theory student in college and in high school, we never learned modes. They said there's major and there's minor, and that's it. And we played songs that were modes, but they were never told, to us that they were modes. Like The Simpsons was a song that we did in percussion ensemble, which is in the Lydian mode. And we were never told, this flatted, this tritone, the fourth is a tritone and it's a Lydian mode. They notated the music with the accidental and never explained it. So I got into studying, excuse me, what modes were, and kind of was like, why did they never show us all these other flavors, Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, Mixolydian, Locrian, and kind of wondered, why did they not tell us this, and how can I use these to write songs? And then come to find out, I go back, and Metallica is kind of their own animal, but they had, jumped in and out of Phrygian with Wherever in My Room might be a song that you could think about that has that kind of tonality to it. The surf songs use Phrygian a lot, and it's real dark. And as a metal musician and a metal music lover, the darker, the better, right? So I really like this Phrygian sound, and I heard that tonality in Dick Dale's rendition of Miserlou, and I'm like, what makes Phrygian Phrygian? Let me start to study this. I actually did this on YouTube. There's Jake on Signal's music studio. The one video he had probably was really when my mind just sort of snapped, and he's playing this random sequence of notes, in MIDI, and changing the tonal center, and your ear just pops and changes and switches into each of these flavors, and they're all the same notes. A minor and C major, they're the same notes. What makes them major or minor? Oh, it's the tonal center. It's the reference point. As an electronics engineering student, I can understand reference point as a ground. If you move the ground, you change the potential difference, but it really didn't change. It's just your reference to it had changed. So that made a lot of sense to me, and that opened up my mind to, I want to play more songs that are in modes. I want to write more songs that are in modes. I'm going to look for more examples of these, and there's a lot of them in a lot of pop culture, especially in like movie scores, unsolved mysteries, Get Your Freak On by Missy Elliott, So once I could start to hear these and identify them, that really got me into like, where could I find more of these songs and start to play them on my own? And surf has answered that question for me. And like I said in my first video, as a metalhead, and I still consider myself a metalhead, I should also mention that the height playing for this band, Decapitated, opening for this band in Christian in 2006 was probably the biggest show that I ever did. 6 Feet Under was actually at that show. They would refuse to talk to us. But the guys in Decapitated hung out, and the guys in Christian hung out. Actually, VTech was Decapitated's drummer, and I had met him in the bathroom that night. Well, I crossed paths with him, I guess I should say. And he said in this thick accent, like, "Hey, man, like I need some drumsticks, and I can't find a store, a music store. Can you loan me your drumsticks?" And I let him use my sticks for the show. Sadly, he passed away not long after that, and I always thought, man, I wish I would have got his signature or something. But I remember he was backstage watching me play during my set with Liquefied Guts, and I was super, super nervous. And I actually played a little bit faster and crazier because I'm like, VTech's like right there, poking his head out, like watching me, you know. So I thought that was really cool. But that was at the Lawrenceville Moose in Pittsburgh, and that was, you know, the height of my, you know, career as a death metal musician. So now, you know, that's almost 20 years in the past. Why do I play music now? Because I still love music. I still love being challenged. And it's an amazing thing to have played music all my life and still find something new, something that can still turn my mind on and say, wow, this is new. I've never thought of it this way, or I've never heard it this way. And YouTube, especially Signal's Music Studio, has really, really been a great way to kind of delve into some of these things that I knew about and never really cared about, or never really knew how I could use them. And I like to use some of those in my writing and to just kind of experiment. And a lot of times they do end up just being kind of academic experiments, especially Locrian. I think Bjork is the only one that really has a song that's actually written in Locrian and kind of sounds good. Other than that, you know, it's used in jazz a lot. And I really don't consider myself much of a jazz aficionado. You know, those are more academic exercises when I listen to them, but it's still cool to be able to identify it and to hear it. So that's kind of my path to get me where I'm at today. I still love metal. I still love death metal. I still love playing fast, but I'm kind of at this turning point where it's like, you know, what do I really want to write? Like surf death metal? You know, I don't know, death or surf music with blast beats. You know, I really don't know. So I'm kind of just experimenting, and that's why I haven't put any of the heavy stuff on this channel, because that's really not what I'm playing. I'm still listening to it, but I haven't really been writing like that. With my new setup, I didn't even order a distortion pedal yet, you know. So, and I wouldn't put a Fender Squire Stratocaster through it anyhow, you know. So I'm definitely I want to continue to write in that style, but I like other styles too, and I think that that's okay, because I was so closed-minded for so long. That was one thing that I can say I didn't like about this. You know, I'm a metalhead, and that's all I listen to. I don't listen to nothing else because nothing else is cool, you know, except for metal, and that's just not true. I love music. I'm a music head. You know, I listen to all types of different music. I really don't care what it is or what you think of me for listening to it. If I like it, I'm going to listen to it. A good example of that is electronic dance music. I love drum and bass. I think as a drummer too, it's really, really, you have to actively listen to it, and it's cool to hear syncopation and polyrhythms in these songs. And the bass, especially like at a live show, they call them raves, you know, you can't go wrong. It's every bit as heavy as the heaviest death metal, especially the dubstep. And dropping those drops in dubstep are heavy. I mean, you can't deny that, and especially coming through walls of 15-inch subwoofers and thousands of watts. Like, that sounds awesome. That energy is great. So I really like all types of different music, and it's cool to be able to jam to some of these drumless tracks too that guys have been putting up that don't infringe on the copyright, you know, thing with YouTube. So I'm going to continue to do that for right now, and that's just kind of where I'm at right now. I'm just kind of feeling around, seeing what this YouTube thing is all about, if I could gain any traction or not, or, you know, this will just be an outlet for my thoughts. I do think I'm going to do some recovery talks. That's a big part of my story, which I haven't really alluded to too much yet. But I feel like, if I could say it most simply, music is my anti-drug. You know, music allows me to obsess over something in a healthy way. It is a therapy for me. It's something I can rely on, and I've had it my entire life, and I've always been able to go back to music, and it's always given me what I've required from it and then some, you know what I mean? So listening to it, analyzing it, playing it, writing it, watching other people's videos, playing it. I just love music. So that's really why I feel I'm here on this planet. It has something to do with, music and my love of electronics and, therapy and finding all these ways to bring these ideas together. It's a weird thing, but in 2025, it's really not out of the realm of possibility, because I see people doing a lot of different things that I would have never expected on the internet 20 years ago. So that's pretty cool. It's pretty exciting. So that's my intentions for this channel. Thank you for listening.